Hello, my name is Carrie McGrath, and this is my analysis of the Harvard Business Publishing Multimedia Case Study, Paul Levy taking charge of the Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center for POL 510 at UMass Dartmouth. I have to admit, I hadn't heard of the Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center or Paul Levy prior to this class and case study. During that time in 2001, I was about 10 years old and all I cared about was Pokemon cards. So I found this to be an interesting case to study and review as an adult because it happened during my lifetime and it's basically right up the street in the Boston area. And it's always good to know where you can go and get some quality medical care and delicious oatmeal cookies. So, Beth Israel Hospital was founded in 1916 by Jewish doctors. They couldn't find any hospitals in the area that would allow them to participate or practice. The Jewish community then banded together to help build the hospital over many years. This idea of community and philanthropy became the foundation for the hospital, and it led the hospital to being known as a leader in research, teaching, and quality care for its patients. In the mid-1990s, Mount Auburn Hospital and New England Baptist Hospital banded together with Beth Israel and the Deaconess Hospital and created Care Group Systems. This was in response to a merger that Brigham and Women's Hospital and Mass General Hospital had made in order to create a larger system. They wanted to make it easier to get patient referrals, specialist referrals, and greater influence with the insurance companies. It was decided that the Beth Israel and the Deaconess hospitals would merge together as a flagship. This would be a larger non-profit hospital, and they would be known as the Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center. Beth Israel was primarily Jewish and known for its academic, clinical, research, teaching, and top-quality patient care. The Deaconess was a Methodist hospital and known for being very businesslike and commercial, and it was known for its surgical specialties. The merger, which was not announced to the Beth Israel staff until basically the last moment, brought together two different hospital cultures and two diverse communities. Each of the hospital's administrations and department heads had their own way of doing things, and instead of being equals in authority, the head of the Beth Israel kind of took over both hospitals, and the Deaconess staff was they were left with little influence in decisions. This led to poor communications with each other and eventually to mistrust and hostility between both of their staff and, until they found themselves in this financial crisis in the early 2000s. So who is Paul Levy? So now that we have a little background on the BID, and how that came to be. We know that by 2001 they were hemorrhaging so much money and they had built up so much debt. It had put a lot of stress on the smaller non-profit hospitals that were under Care Group. So now they were asking, well, who can help us? Can we even be helped? What went wrong? And how do we fix this? And luckily for the BID, they had Paul Levy. Now, Paul Levy had a track record of being a skilled negotiator and the type of person who was always up for challenging tasks. He had 3 degrees from MIT, and by age 27, he was the head of the Department of Public Utilities. By 36, he was the head of the Massachusetts Water Resources Authority. Levy is credited for updating the water systems and cleaning up the Boston Harbor, as well as holding the Water and Sewer Authority more accountable. Deadlines imposed under his leadership were met and projects were completed. He was at the time the executive dean for administration at the Harvard Medical School when the search for a new CEO at the Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center began. Levy was recommended to take the CEO job at the BID by the head dean of his department because he thought that Levy was qualified enough and could handle the pressures of the job. Levy had gained a lot of knowledge and, peers over the years, and while he was in the public sector. He knew that when Beth Israel merged with the Deaconess, they focused more on patient care over cost-cutting. The board of directors did not set clear objectives or hold management accountable. There was a severe lack of understanding of processes and implementations on all fronts. Knowing this, in November of 2001, Levy went to the job search coordinators and told them his conditions if he were to take the CEO job. His first ultimatum was that he wanted to be in the position by January 2002, or else he didn't want it. He said, hey, it's November. If you can't make a decision by January, then, there's a problem with governance, and I don't want to be part of an organization like that. His second ultimatum was the reason why he wanted to be in the job by the first week of January. The Hunter report came out in late January. This is the report from the consulting firm on financials and suggestions on how to keep the BID profitable. He would be able to take that report, establish a framework, and break it down for the entire hospital to understand. He didn't want to wait until after it came out so that people could maybe blame the consulting firm who produced the Hunter report, because ultimately this was a BID issue and there's no one else to blame. In December of 2001, Levy asked for another meeting with the search coordinators since he hadn't heard back from them. He proposed more preconditions for taking the job as CEO. First, he wanted the board of directors to be taken out of everyday dealings of the hospital and instead make himself the liaison between the BOD and the medical staff. They had too many hands in there. The BOD was too big. Member numbers were in the 40s, and he asked them to shrink themselves down to a manageable size, between 15 and 18 members within the first 6 months. And third, he needed to be in the job within the first week of January, or else he was out. So what makes Levy a successful manager? I think we are already seeing what makes him stand out as a manager, and when he's speaking to the recruit coordinator and communications further into the case study with the chiefs, the CFO, the CEO, we see the same polite yet very firm way he conveys his requests. He is direct and confident. Levy knew that he was the best option, but if the BID and the board of directors, the care group members, they couldn't make their choice within his time frame, then there would be no point because he wouldn't be able to help fix the BID. The hospital would have no choice but to be sold to a for-profit group and lose their Harvard affiliation, the prestige, and the academic and research status. And patient care would suffer. All of those things are what drew a lot of industry-leading doctors and researchers and nurses to the BID. Care Group was considering selling the hospital to a for-profit group, but Levy met with the BOD, the Care Group, and the Attorney General and came up with a plan with milestones and ways to hold himself and his staff accountable, and it proved to everyone involved that the BID was worth saving. When it came down to conveying difficult information, Levy did just that. He did not hide the facts from the BID staff like in previous years. He made it a point to make all knowledge regarding the potential sale of the hospital employee and public knowledge. He went to the Boston Herald and reported that the trustees of the BID did not want this information to be known by staff. Levy understood that by not telling them, there would be more panic if rumors were started. Staff would potentially leave, and that would affect the patients. Along with the sale of the hospital, Levy was open in communicating his plans to save the hospital. Plans with staffing and layoffs, and the financial status of the hospital, and the direction that the hospital was going in. Everything was made available to all staff members, and he did it with multiple open forums, and this was to accommodate people with different schedules within the hospital. He did it in emails, he posted on the hospital website, he reached out to newspapers, and he did it by just walking around and meeting people in the different departments. So, when the Hunter report came out, it suggested that the BID lay off between 500 and 700 people. The first concern, of course, was who would bear the brunt of the layoff. Would it be the nurses? Would patient care be compromised? And Levy's answer was no. Nurses would be the ones to stay, and instead of laying off, 500 or 700 people, they were going to start with 150 instead, slowly. Now this shows what I think is a good manager, and what a good manager can do in times of stress on the staff. And we have to remember at this point, it's still February 2012. Levy is still new to his position, and he's still new to the hospital, and he's only been there a month. But he understands that layoffs affect everyone, including the remaining staff. People, they've lost their friends, and now workloads are going to increase. And Levy still has more information to announce about the BID recovery plan. But he specifically waits a few days to let everyone adjust. He humbles himself and acknowledges the current difficulties and praises the remaining staff on their hard work and their dedication, during this transition period, and he tries to even lift their spirits by incorporating inspiration from a recent Patriots game. So, multiple times throughout the case study, Levy was directly challenged and sometimes undermined by fellow board members, and also by departmental chiefs, and even his chief operating officer. Most of these issues were due to a lack of communication between themselves or directly with Levy. Whenever he learned that there were plans being made without his consult, or there were murmurs of disagreements days after when they should have been addressed, either during a meeting or with a follow-up email, he called it out. There were many times where Levy was being addressed in an email between himself and the chief, and the chief ended up carbon copying or CCing the email to multiple other chiefs. Levy then had to basically embarrass that chief in front of everyone else and tell him, this email is counterproductive to the previously agreed upon plans, and this should have been brought up in a meeting and not, 7 days later. You can tell from the interviews that he does that he doesn't like to do this, but he also can't tolerate that kind of behavior from his staff, especially when they're all supposed to be working together towards saving, the BID. Levy's style of management was a breath of fresh air to the BID. He was a leader who believed in supporting and empowering his staff and making sure that all information was available to everyone. He laid down new rules for how the BOD and the chiefs would go about improving communications between themselves and their staff, implementing new departmental procedures, and setting performance and monthly budget follow-ups. This was quite different from the previous years where communications were stagnant and each department head had complete control and did their own thing. Levy also showed how supportive he was even when he was technically firing someone. He was finally at his limit with his COO and her lack of cooperation, so he spoke to her in private and told her that ties needed to be severed. She was capable and, a knowledgeable chief operating officer, and it wasn't about her personal qualifications, and he didn't want to harm her professionally by outright firing her. But Levy needed someone who was more amicable to change, someone who was more willing to communicate and follow through on tasks. He gave her the options on, how she wanted to step down. If she wanted to announce it herself, or if she wanted to wait a few days, or even announce the departure as part of the transition, that she had seen the BID was moving towards stability and that it was a safe time to move on. Instead, she told her staff that she was fired and leaving the next day. So, again, he has to go on kind of damage control, and let everyone know what happened. So the first 6 months under Levy showed that what he was doing was making a big difference. The financial results of the BID were consistent, and they were better than what the new budget had anticipated. They were cash flow positive for the past 5 months, which at this time was the first time they were cash flow positive for that span since the merger had taken place 5 years prior. So this shows that he was able to take a failing hospital, set it up to survive, and then in the near future start to thrive. And he couldn't have done it without being consistently direct, transparent, compassionate, supportive, and calling out bad behavior when he saw it. Thank you.